So last week there wasn't a lot of news that was interesting or even really relevant to anything going on, or they kind of double booked themselves basically with talking about the same subject that could be talked about in another article. It was very, very lackluster, which also continued on into this week. Seems like a lot of the same type of articles are basically covering the same exact thing, just in like they're going like, oh, we're gonna leave this piece of information out so we can post it tomorrow. It's very, very lazy. But overall, I did want to talk about some of the stuff that came up. I was very tempted, honestly, to skip another week, but I don't know. We can make six subjects work out. But overall, we did skip out on last week, and we have I think it's literally just two articles that I think I want to kind of talk about and the subject matter. But let's talk about the more important one to me personally. From Software's focus hasn't shifted to multiplayer. This was literally like 2 weeks ago at this point, or like a week and a half. But there was an interview with Nintendo where basically From Software's Dusk Bloods came out, which looks incredibly good. And the thing with the new Elden Ring like game, Night Rain, uh, is and similar to Dusk Bloods in this regard, is that there's a lot of focus on like co-op and like multiplayer aspects to it. Uh, and with both games, it seems like for a lot of people that haven't been around, it seems like From Software is going to a more multiplayer focused like orientation on like how they work in the gaming industry. If you haven't been around, I guess that's kind of your stance. From Software is not going to go there. Uh, don't get me wrong; they're always going to have at this point always going to have a multiplayer component because it's a very popular mechanic to add to their games, and it kind of brings new life into sometimes less than stellar situations. But like it's one of those things where I don't think it's ever gonna be the prime focus for From Software. I do think maybe it just happens to be that Elden Ring was so successful. Night Rain is just like the great like frosting on the cake, and to make it a real like final piece to then be able to move on because overall it's it's kind of just them cashing in more on their own success here, which I mean is good and sometimes bad, but we'll see what happens. I am excited for Dusk Bloods. Dusk Bloods looks pretty cool, and Night Rain, of course, looks great as well. Uh, I do think having a PvPvE uh, is interesting nowadays uh, because there's a lot of PvP games with PvE elements or PvE with kind of a PvP area slash elements in it, but very few mesh them well. To where it feels like a free flow system where like you're taking down a dungeon and then all of a sudden someone just went to the same dungeon you went to and you're now in a fight to secure your own loot. There's like games directly like Tarkov does PvP really well. You can look at something like Rust, which has some PvP or PvE elements, but it's primarily a PvP game. And so it's like not a lot really meshes well if you don't do it in like a great fashion. It looks like Dustbloods is looking to change a little bit of that. Uh, yeah, so it's a online multiplayer title at its core, as said, but as a company, we have not decided to shift to a more multiplayer focused direction with titles going forward. This is basically setting up for what I think will be an announcement more than likely next year on a few of returning games because From Software has a huge lineup that they could definitely pull from. They've been around a long time. I understand a lot of people really just look at them and they're like Dark Souls, that's where they came from, or even Demon Souls if they want to go back. But there's a lot more to them, and I would love to see sequels to games that we never got, or even like kind of remakes of a lot of games. Kingsfield comes to mind, uh, and there's a lot in From Software's back pocket that would be interesting. So we have some Switch two stuff to talk about. I kind of this is the only thing that I think was the big talking point last week, and I actually did record a news thing, but it was like 11 minutes, and it was primarily this. But now that I've kind of left it up, the main talking point I want to bring up is that some UA retailers are ignoring the suggested retail price of Switch 2 games, which is incredibly good. I think this is a good thing on uh, some retailers. It's really responsible of them to do this, and it's also good for your business because as soon as you say this in all this kind of controversy, you now have a positive light shone on you. Now, of course, there's going to be detractors from it. There always is, but I feel like you have put yourself ahead, and I feel like you're ultimately going to sell more of the product you get, and yeah, your profit margins may not be as much. Say, I don't know how much the exact like buy from Nintendo is, because I have never owned a business that deals in direct uh, selling from company uh, to consumer that was video game oriented. But I do know that you usually get them for like decently cheap in quotes, which is why a lot of digital games have really, or that's why digital has been so kind of focused on in recent years. Uh, but the big reason that digital is so good is because there's no retailer for you to lose a bunch of money to. Because it used to be that if a game sold for 50, for instance, it just came out, and you had 30 copies that needed to go to this Walmart, right? They would buy the game at like $30 sometimes, and that would be it. Uh, and the reason that they would do this, if you look at like Walmart, GameStop, and so on, is because ultimately they would sell probably 10 to 15 if it was a well launched game. They would get some returns, and those would kind of keep going in and out, in and out. Eventually, they would get stuff that kind of be put in, but they would lower the price enough the first time where it seems like a good deal, but they still make a little bit of money off of it. And even if there's 10 left, they can still write that off in their taxes, because it's loss of value and so on and so forth. There's a lot of depreciation in this stuff, uh, and there's a lot of stuff you can do to make physical games, or at least how it used to be, not as big of an impact of losing $20 per copy. Um, that's kind of gone away, mostly because it seems like, from what I've heard, I know a bunch of people that do own businesses that do the what they call the wait list for video game retailing. So they do what is known as a kind of pre-order check, and they do like percentages based on their area, and then they get some for the normal copies. And if more than enough pre-orders end up going, then they put that, and they're like, oh, we're out, we'll get more. But overall, it seems like they usually take quite a big hit in the price. Like, for example, $60 would probably be like 42, 43. And then you look at something like 70, it seems like it'll be about 50. It's usually like a $20 loss from Nintendo or the big company, whichever one it may be. Uh, and that's to kind of get them on the shelves in a way. And that's why digital is a big focus. Now, of course, numbers change, and I don't know the exacts, but when it comes to retailers like this, at the end of the day, they may be looking at it as if we can make even, but uh, actually like get people in our stores or on our website that see other stuff and buy stuff, then it's all profit for them like that. Or the Switch 2 games are being sold by Nintendo to retailers at a very cheap price when they're able to do this. Now, a lot of retailers are pretty greedy, just as Nintendo is greedy here. Uh, so they may not follow in these footsteps. I heard apparently there's a few stores uh, in America that is doing this. I don't know enough about it. I haven't seen much coverage on it, but it's interesting to see. It's also one of those things where America won't the United States specifically won't be getting Switch 2 access that easily, so I don't know if that's going to be backstepped or not. But this is also kind of covering the price problem that Nintendo has put forth. I kind of have glossed over it, but if you didn't know, they're they're doing some ridiculous numberings. So suggested retail price of Mario Kart World comes out to $80. Um, and that's not okay. I'm gonna be the first guy to come out and say this. That's not true. A lot of people have said this. Uh, I understand you can look back in history and you can see $100 Sega Master System game, or you can see $80 N64 game. You could see $100 SNES game. If you look into specific game like series or popular games at the time, or just they weren't sure if people were going to pick it up, so they put out a ridiculous amount of money, and then they happen to win because it was popular. Like, there's a lot of stories like that throughout the ages of video games. uh I'm sorry, with how production is kind of put into place, and in my opinion, video game development is at its laziest. Uh, I'm gonna be the guy to say it. No video game developers deserve $70, let alone 80, let alone 90, let alone 100. Uh, I have not played a game that has made me go, "Oh, this would have been worth an $80 price tag recently." Now, there's some that, like, personally I had a lot of fun with, and I got, if I had paid $80, I would have been happy with the amount of hours I spent. But it's, you're putting at the initial drop price. If you walk in somewhere and you buy something for $80, there's a lot of expectations that come with it, and I feel like as soon as you put $80 on the line, your expectations better be met to the full, or you're fucked. And I feel like this is ultimately going to be a problem as we go. I feel like it's even happening now with $70 AAA games. $70 is, like, it's not that much higher than 60, but as you get higher and higher with AAA games, you price the lower consumer out, which, in my opinion, is the best place to sell your game. Because if you if you have a lower consumer that just buys 4 games a year and they pick your game, and they'll tell their other friends that maybe don't have a lot of money, and they'll make their decision like that. I ultimately think that's where you need to go. If you ever make a AAA game, I actually recommend $50. I think $50 is incredibly fair, but I think the normal $70 right now is very, very lackluster. But hey, talking about more value problems, we have Ubisoft. Continuing on with the Crew lawsuit. I kind of said but basically, if you don't know, a long time ago, Ubisoft shut down the Crew. This happened in, like, 2023. It was decided, and then it was uh, eventually, like, closed down the servers. And a lot of people's problems is that there was no expectation of this game going away completely. And that's the big problem, is that you look at some games like Midnight Club 3, uh, for, like, PlayStation, for instance, or even Xbox 360, is that you look at it and it's actually technically un like playable, not unplayable, it's unfinishable from a, like, achievement and trophy uh viewpoint, because multiplayer is gone, the servers are gone, but the main game is still there, and there's an argument to be made that technically the value of the game is still relevant. The thing about the Ubisoft stuff is there's no value left for people that have bought it. It's not like it was it was discontinued and it was thrown away from the shelf. uh but unlike other things that have been delisted, like Deadpool, Marvel Ultimate Alliance comes to mind, there's still value from having that game, even if it was delisted. The Crew, there's no value besides the fact that the servers are gone, and you have a reasonable complaint. Um, when it comes to Ubisoft's big thing, though, is you can't complain It shut down the crew because you never owned it and you weren't deceived by the lack of an offline version to access to a decade-old discontinued video game. This has a lot of problems in general for a lot of people that are on game preservation side, which I think is a very serious issue that we face. Because at the end of the day, you look at something that, say, gets a remaster, gets a port, gets a remake. Um, yeah, you have that new version. You have new consumers that are getting into this video game series or just this video game, but ultimately it's a different game. Yes, it may be a port. A great example, and we'll talk about Spyro in a little bit because there's interesting news there. But you look at the Spyro Reignited trilogy. Yes, I get it. They're really close to one to ones, but they're not exact. And when it comes to game preservation, decisions were made in the 90s that are different from 2020 or around there. I think it's like 2016 or 17 it came out, but it's a different time. And the game preservation side is focusing on keeping the decisions that were made at the time, whether they were right or wrong or stupid or correct or whatever you want to say, keeping those intact because they are interesting and is a part of the video game history as a whole. It's it's important that we keep that. And when you completely kill off a game like The Crew, there's no historical decision, there's no decoding, like going into the source code and figuring out how it was built, which I mean they kind of did, but uh, it's just overall now just a disappointing like stance to take on by Ubisoft. It to say you can't complain because the crew. I will really wonder if this is just a response to kind of like keep people away so they can own more like so once the first failure happens they can have the precedent so they can be like, yep, this is the way it's going to be. Ultimately, I don't think it would have been that hard to add an offline mode to the crew. I played it. I think it's actually a decent game. I'd probably give it like a 5 to a 6 out of 10, which I think is fine. Um, but it's one of those things where I like some people really loved it, and it's really hurtful, not from just like the consumers that are going to hate you, but from the consumers that are kind of unsure about all your online games. I mean, look at Siege. Siege is one game that you don't buy for the offline, but it does have an offline game mode, which is more relevant to speak of. But you look at the other inspiration that Ubisoft took from this, and they added offline modes to the Crew 2 and Crew Motorfocus. But the original would like it's not hard to add that if you're able to add the Crew 2 and Crew Motorfest, unless there's like some problem that you don't have like access to the code anymore, which has happened to video game developers, and it's a fair problem. But come out and say that, and just be open and honest and be like, we can't pay for servers anymore for a game with 102 players a month, and I know it was probably more, and we're getting zero money back from this. We have no ability to edit this. I'm sorry. We have to let it go and give time to maybe let some mod team or let other people give it a shot. And if it works, it works. A private server can have access, and then call it a day. But doing this is ultimately very backhanded to your consumer base. But that's enough about Ubisoft. Ubisoft is always on their bullshit. Uh, yeah, a lot of people still have. I mean, the first comment on this article is literally, which is why I've never paid for an Ubisoft game, but I have plenty of them. Talking about pirate stuff. Uh, yeah, the lawsuit, by the way, is more focused on the fact that there are activation codes, retail version of the game that doesn't expire till 2099, implied that the whole package would remain playable until that date. Uh, yeah, and it also argues the crew's currency could be considered a sale of a gift certificate, which are not allowed to expire under California law. This is actually very important, but we'll see what happens with this lawsuit as we go. It's been in effect for over a year now, but we'll see. Speaking of Spyro, I talked about earlier. Spyro and Crash Bandicoot Reboot Studio, Toys for Bob, wants to bring back Banjo-Kazooie next. Now, this is going to be a little bit of a hot take, but I really think that Banjo-Kazooie would deserve it more than Crash and Spyro, because I feel like Spyro and Crash didn't really fade out as badly as Banjo Kazooie, but they still faded out. Whereas Banjo Kazooie was remembered for decades as the game series done a great disservice with Nuts and Bolts, even if Nuts and Bolts wasn't that bad. But uh, it's one of those things that I would love to see it. I would love to see what their vision is for traditionally like a new thing. But at the same time, I don't think Banjo Kazooie really deserves to be around. I look at something like Crash, and I don't like Crash as a whole. I think it's a pretty mid video game series that's very popular for some reason I can't attach myself to, but I understand the love for the series. I look at something like Crash and Spyro, and when they came out to like these reimagined trilogies, is I can see the love and attention put into this. Whereas Banjo Kazooie, I feel like the original had so much love and attention just put into this game uh, that I wouldn't necessarily want a different brush to paint the same picture. It's just it's I don't know. It feels a little kind of lost in the sauce, so to say. It's really hard, but one they as said by one of the leads over at Toys for Bob, one company we'd like to work with is one we're already working with, Team Xbox. They've been a great partner, and they also have an interesting roster of characters that Toys for Bob could have a lot of fun with. The Honey Bear is the first one that comes to mind. I think we all agree Banjo's been hibernating long enough, right? And it doesn't necessarily mean a Banjo Kazooie remake or reboot is already in the works, but it basically highlights it. And I feel like this is the kind of what's it called, the highlight to a potential Banjo Kazooie. I'll be excited to see it because I feel like Ukulele, which was a spiritual successor, kind of was disappointing in my opinion, and I feel like 3D platformers are dead for the most part. There's some that kind of stand out, yes, and they come around every so often, but I feel like it would definitely be interesting to see Banjo Kazooie potentially take center stage for the 3D platformers for a little bit. It wouldn't be that long because, it's like every 3 months you get a good one. But hey, it would be cool. Next, we go into the probably. This is going to take like just a minute, but I want to talk about how stupid this is. Zelda's Nintendo Switch 2 ports finally let you repair equipment via a mobile app bonus. So basically, there will be Zelda Notes, which is on the app, the Nintendo app, which will let you. Which one of the rewards is equipment repairs. Now, I have a problem with this just flat out. I am tired of so many detractions from video games. When you open up a game, I hated this with Rockstar in Grand Theft Auto 5 as well. What was it, the Rockstar Plus app, or there was like a Rockstar app or something. I hated it then, and I still hate it now. When games have this bullshit of outside like things like stopping from putting your controller down to pick up your phone, or to pick up your or to go to another screen to then do something in the game. And like there's a really cool things with like the app where it allows you to navigate and leave notes on an interactive game map, share creations, basically the Weverse. But ultimately, like the like bonuses of stuff, I I hate that shit. I think it detracts from the game, and also item decay is a core feature in both games, which makes me feel that it's kind of whack, and it's also kind of dumb. It's a lot like loot boxes in this way. You can only that the repair bonus is rewarded randomly and can only be rolled once every 24 hours. Um, I just can't under like I can't understate how much I really dislike having an app for a video game. Unless it's something that's like inherently really cool or attaches itself well. Like I've seen Rust do it in a decent way, but they're also psychopaths that play that game. So it makes sense that they would attach basically an alarm to their phone. It's a cool idea, honestly, because offline ratings is a big thing. Rust has come up a lot, even though I don't play the game. But it's just a good example of what I think is a serviceable app versus whatever this is. And I feel like I don't necessarily like this. I feel like you're loot boxing a feature that I don't really care is being changed. I feel like I don't know. It's definitely something I could see not being as negative to a lot of people because they don't really care about this stuff. But I think it's a problem in general where there's a lot of video game apps that have existed that I don't think should exist. And we're gonna finish this up with Elder Scrolls Oblivion remake screenshots leaked online, which yeah. So Oblivion remake has been teased by a bunch of people for a long time, and it's yeah, it got some screenshots leaked, and a lot of people are just kind of waiting patiently, in quote, for the confirmation by Bethesda or Microsoft. And a lot of people are believing that it'll be within the next month. Uh, I think it would be perfect for it to kind of put out a summer game. Uh, but I don't really know how like this would affect stuff because you look at it if it's on Game Pass, right? You look at Microsoft's main goal here is to start the summer with getting people hooked to Game Pass, so it carries on into their they go back to school, and they ultimately like a lot of them just forget, and they don't have enough time to play games, so it works out really well in their favor. That weird sentence for me, but overall, we'll see if this comes to fruition. I am kind of excited to see Oblivion get put in more people's hands. I feel like it would have been more exciting to see Morrowind. Uh, yeah, but I think I think one of the things that would be cool is that some of the images show appears to be a special edition of the game featuring new horse armor, which I think it has to be a memeable thing, right? It's very funny. I hope Bethesda is aware enough to make fun of themselves. So please do. Uh, it would be great, but yeah, we'll see what happens. I think it's also interesting because I think Skyvian. I I don't remember the spelling, but it was a mod that was supposed to bring Oblivion to the Skyrim like level or whatever. So we'll see what happens with that. It really sucks if all their work was kind of pointless in the end. Um, yeah, that's basically it for this week. There was no intercut thing because I kind of skipped last week. But hopefully the coming weeks are a little happier or they're a little more interesting because I'll be honest, it was a struggle to even fill up two like 2 weeks for something reasonable. But yep, that's it for right now. I'll catch you guys later, and we pray for good news.